Hey, how's it going? I hope you're doing good. So I'm just at home now. I got home a little while ago. I got up real early, kind of slept a little bit last night. Went up to the casino, won just a little bit of money. And on the way home, I said, why don't I go to the grocery store? When I got there, because I've been buying some food and stuff. When I got there, I said they had, sometimes at the grocery store, and sometimes like at at Costco and different places, they have like a rib roast with the ribs and the meat and everything, and it's usually pretty expensive because it's a much larger piece of meat. But this morning, because I won a little bit of money, and somehow I was like, it was in the morning, I was thinking about what I was going to get, and I saw it there. I said, you know what, I'm going to get this. And so I brought it home. I got it in the refrigerator. About one potato. Because I'm going to cook it with some other stuff. Not the beef right now, but later with some other stuff. And I got some of the pasilla peppers. So I got the pasilla peppers. I'm just going to leave. Actually, I'm going to open the bag just to let them get air, because actually I'm going to get a paper towel to set those on, because we've had so much rain here in Washington. Which is, just steady rain, instead of sort of the real light rain that sort of just kind of lasts. This is a heavier rain that lasts longer. And so everything here is very damp. I mean, you can smell, after about 3 or 4 days just driving around, you get sort of that aroma, of just like smelling stuff from the roads just being wet all day long. And so, I can't really compare it to anything except maybe, most of the time, weather in other areas, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, it'll rain a lot harder. And sometimes it can last for just a few days shorter than this. But we've definitely had sort of that consistent rain without the heavy rain coming down, off and on. So it's just sort of been more consistent over maybe 6 or 7 more days. So, which normally doesn't happen. Normally it'll be gray and drizzly for 5 days or whatever, and then it clears up for a couple days or whatever. And the total amount of rainfall is not that much, but it just seems like we're getting really washed here with the rain and just soaking up by 5 days ago, a week ago, maybe even 10 days ago, everything was pretty much soaked. And so we haven't had a real pickup in terms of like thunderstorms or lightning storms, but we just sort of had the same rain, for an additional 10 days. So, everything's soaked, and, places that have the entry rugs out and everything, they're mushy with almost like they're their own puddle. They can't really dry out at all. So any of that stuff that sits outside, it sort of goes above and beyond just getting wet and then drying out. You start having the, sort of whatever foliage or growth starts growing on stuff, streaking down, sort of gets on everything. So it's a lot of the reason why we don't have, a lot of times here in Washington, you don't really have outdoor furniture or anything that really stays outside very long, because if you get a 10 or 15 day rain, this is up around over 20 days or so now, and so you're talking about just sort of an extended number of days of just almost every day raining. There might have been 28 hours or something where it stopped, but I mean, not enough to dry the ground, the grass, stuff out. So I remember seeing other places, California, whatever, people can have outdoor type of furniture and stuff if it's covered, right? But out here, it's just when the whole ground and everything around gets soaked, it just eventually stuff is just going to start getting like moldy and damp. So anyway, I didn't sleep that much. I've been playing the video games. I got all that controversy about Cyberpunk 2077. It's a great game. It's a bad game. Even finding myself captured in part of the game, because it's got all sort of this fun, like, adult themes in the video game. You're like, oh, why don't I play this? Why don't I play that? You know, and then I was posting about it because later, you know, you try to get like these reader things, and I thought, oh, I'll save it on Stadia and then go back and read it later and then like play better in the game. But sometimes you got to jump around different characters, and like I don't know whether the entire world isn't totally open, because like a lot of times you get to different doors and I'll say doors locked, and so like you're like, oh, go into this like, you know, room or cafe, like, you know, whatever, like video or whatever, like, you know, sometimes you can, like, they call it jack in to like, you know, the network and stuff. And so a lot of it's locked. So you're like, well, where do I go? And sometimes the characters and stuff in the game, you're like, I can't beat that guy. I can't beat this character. If I go there, it's done. Like, and I was already sort of talking about that. And so I thought I'd gotten kind of smooth sailing into the game. Sometimes you get to games, you're like, oh, I'm going to be smooth sailing the rest of the game. And I sort of got stopped there, even beyond sort of the theme of the game, where you get stopped and sort of have like a recovery or whatever, and then Keanu Reeves enters the game as Johnny Silverhand and everything. So anyway, I'm hoping my back doesn't go out. I am going to get a soda. I'm going to get a Coca-Cola because I need to have something to drink. I'm probably going to get hungry right in the middle of this. This is going to take a while. This is over 18 pounds of beef and you know, just over 18 pounds, and it was about $72. And so it was good to get, and they it's USDA Select. They had USDA Choice, but it was, you know, more expensive when you buy that, you know, that much meat. You know, it really adds up. So I wanted to try to get something smaller, less expensive than all the others that were there, and so I got this one. So I'm hoping it's going to be good. You know, I normally buy Choice, but you know, because of the size and everything, and so I'm going to cut up this sort of the how I want it. And so what I'll do is I'll basically have 3 parts to this. I'm going to have fat part of it that will go in containers. And then I will have, what I'm going to try to do is cut more of meaty ribs instead of the thinner ribs that I've had that I've showed you that sometimes get the black gloss and sometimes end up being render only. I want to try to get the ribs cut, not the bones, but the meat around it, so there's enough meat on it that I can cook it for a while. Eat a lot of the meat similar to the Whole Foods ribs that I got that were much more expensive, okay? And so I'm going to try to do that the best I can. There's going to be a couple other bones and stuff in it that I'm going to have to kind of cut around. I'm not that familiar in terms of cutting this much meat at this much time, and so I'm a little apprehensive. I thought, should I wrap the whole thing and season it and put it back in the refrigerator until later? Should I try to do it all now? You know, and I'm not really sure what's going to happen when I do this, because you know, I can feel my back right now getting tight. So I don't know if I should cut it in half and then try to do half and half and take breaks. You know, if I set it out and it warms up a lot, you know, I'll be a little bit concerned. And I also am a little bit concerned about getting everything back in the freezer, because I'm consistently buying meat other days and putting it in the freezer. So I want to make sure I have the right way to get all this meat in the freezer as it is. So I don't know how it's all going to fit. I may have to get rid of some of this stuff, but even so, you know, like stuff on the door isn't always the best place to store meat. When you open that refrigerator door, it warms up. That's why I have some of the donuts there, you know, that I can cook later and stuff. So, but if I get everything cut up, what I might try to do is cook, you know, render the containers of fat that I have. Oh no, I don't have any in there. I cooked it all. Well, I don't know. I don't know exactly what to do. But the one thing that will be different is I might cut up the ribs in individually or in sets of you know in two parts, so that I can get everything in there. Part of me just says, you know, take a rest, take a nap, but part of me feels like I got to get this done now, and so you know that's sort of a big part of my life. I know when I worked in finance, you talk about the business leaders, the leaders of the bank, the CEOs of the bank. The first man that was the head of the bank that I worked at, the CEO, was Hank Paulson, and you'd get voice messages. That was kind of the cool thing. You'd get voice messages. So you get into work early, 6:30 in the morning or whatever, 7. That really wasn't the right time for me to get in. When I first started, it was 9 o'clock, and then somehow I worked late, and then we had a new manager. Manager said get in at 8 o'clock. You're like, man, there's no way I'm going to be tired every single day, unless I take a 2-week vacation or whatever. So, and then some of the guys that, were more the money making, they got in 6:37 or whatever. You always thought, oh man, I'll get in early or whatever. But, it was a little bit different, stuff like that. So I could never really get to work at 6:30 every day. I mean, somehow every job I took, either at that time or after about 2 or 3 months, I don't want to say my personal engine, right? But just like my schedule and everything, and being able to wake up and go to bed and sleep regularly and get everything done. It's like pretty soon you're like, I can't even wake up, on the weekend, and so you sort of feel like you get run down. Not necessarily by the job, but just by the schedule, right? Up at 6:30, or into the office at 6:30 or 7:30 every day, right? You're like, what do you do to not oversleep? Oh, go work out early. So you get up earlier, right? And then you're so tired, you're like, well, how am I going to get out of bed? I'm so drowsy. You gotta set the alarm an hour earlier, and then you end up being, one of those people that hits the snooze button all the time. You're like, this has never happened to me in my life ever, as a kid, 6, 7 years old. 6 a.m. as soon as the light comes in the window, right? You're hopping out of bed. There's no way you're going back to sleep. By the time you get to be in your 20s, you're like, I have a job in an office I'm supposed to report into, do really well, or as best I can. It ends up being more and more difficult. And you're like, I'm now hitting the snooze button every morning. I'm trying to buy new alarm clocks. I had this alarm clock thing that was, eventually, for hearing impaired, but I was like, otherwise I just don't wake up at all in the morning. It was just really a struggle. So anyway, you'd get voicemail, which is kind of cool, and you'd listen to the voicemail. I didn't get voicemail from a lot of other people regularly, right? You do almost everything on email, but you get, CEO leadership, and so even on the internet and stuff, the guy that took over for Hank Paulson was Lloyd Blankfein, and that's what I was getting at. As he would talk about sometimes the sprint, the marathon, a series of sprints, and it really ends up being like that when you have really bad back pain, because you think like, oh, I'm gonna cut up meat, I'm gonna get it all prepared and back into the freezer or whatever and season how I want it, and so if you go slow, it ends up just the entire thing takes way too long and long and long. But if you rush, not rush through it, but if you go faster for a shorter period of time, you're in more pain, but you seem to get it all done. And then you go sort of collapse on the couch type of thing. And so, a lot of that, sort of internal engine, you keep doing that, rush, fast. Then you stop, you go collapse on the couch, right? And then, you kind of do that again and again and again. As opposed to saying, I'll just go slow through, everything, and it'll just take longer or whatever, stuff like that. So, I always remember that. So, and I feel like that. But there's a lot of things like that. It's sort of like riding a bike up a hill, right? When I was a kid and we had, dirt bikes basically. And I lived in kind of a little bit of a hill area. I posted my hometown in Medina, Washington, and there was kind of hills and stuff. So you had to learn how to ride bikes. There were hills that you could not ride up. I mean, it was just, there was no way. And even on the bikes that you could change the gears on, you could push your pedal faster, and the tire would move faster, but you didn't always get that even sort of cadence to go all the way up the hill. And so a lot of times you kind of said, well, if I try to sprint up this hill, I'll stop at the top, but I won't stop, a third of the way down or a fourth of the way down trying to go slow. and then not have any momentum to be able to get back on the bike and cycle it all the way up to the top again, right? Because a lot of times if you're on a hill, steep hill, if that bike stops and you try to get back on and pedal it again, you can't pedal on a road. It just you can't get the momentum. It's like you start falling back, you sit, you got to set your foot down, and you're like, there's no way I can even get this bike on momentum going back up the hill. So, you say, and I don't want to end up pushing the bike up the hill all the time. And so a lot of times when you ride bikes in an area that's hill, later on in high school and stuff, people started doing more, on mountain biking on trails and stuff. But in terms of like on a cement, road in their neighborhood or whatever, if you have hills and stuff, sometimes you had to decide. You're like, I'm going to pedal as fast as I can up this hill, and then when I get to the top, or it's just, whenever I get too tired to go anymore, I'll just stop on the bike, right? But other days you're like, I'm so tired already, like I just played a sports game with my friends, or I was at, some activity or whatever, and there's no way I'm going to have that, that sprint energy up the hill. But you start biking slow, and sometimes you just stop immediately, like I'm just going to have to push the bike up the hill. But you could also get real sore, your back would get sore too, because you're kind of leaning over to hold the bike handles, trying to push it up the hill, and you end up saying, man, this bike is so heavy, maybe it would be easier just to go really fast early and try to get as far up the hill as I can. And, some days I won't make it all the way up the hill, but other days I might make it all the way up the hill, and then I'm breathing heavy and I'm tired at the top of the hill or close to the top of the hill, but I made it so much faster and farther. So that's kind of the point I'm getting at. So anyway, that's basically what I'm thinking about. This is a lot of meat, so I'm really not sure how I'm going to do this. So I'm going to get the meat out now. I got to get the seasonings. And this is so much meat. I mean, you're talking about almost too much meat here. I mean, it's a lot of meat. I really don't. So it is a large piece of meat here. You can see it here. It's 18 pounds. Okay. It's USDA, and it's got the shield there and everything, and I'm basically gonna have to cut into this the best I can. And I want to be careful not to spill anything in there, but I've got to get this sort of all done and put away, and I can already feel the pain in my back. I'm just like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. It was $72. It's over 18 pounds, and I'm going to get this all done. So I'm going to get the aluminum foil out, and it's a little bit of a concern because I've got to figure out how to get everything back in there and season it and get everything sort of cut up how I want it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get a seasoning bowl, and I'm going to get all the seasonings in it I get. I pretty much just eyeball the seasonings because I have no idea exactly how many seasonings. I mean, it sort of goes way out. That's the other thing. If you ever have a job where you're like, this amount or this size of something is just totally different from anything I can really conceptualize. You sort of say, I sort of, when I cut up a little bit, it's like, 3 scoops of this, 3 scoops of that, 3 scoops of this, stir it around, add it all seems to work out, right? When you get something like this, you're just like, what would be the formula you'd use? Is it the same per size? Do you cut part of it in half? So. And it ends up being sort of a larger thing to deal with because you're like, some of this stuff like, salt goes a long way. You start combining it, you actually don't need it for as much for each piece or whatever because it ends up, soaking through the whole piece of meat. And this is going to be under in spice, definitely. I'm definitely going to be under in spice right off. But the last couple times I've done this, I've been over, and I don't want to be over on spice. I'm going to be under this time, and I'm already finishing some of the spices. I've really sort of started to go through some of the spices a lot faster. They do add up in price in terms of spices. But in reality, you know, you can definitely find spices that are less expensive than other spices. Sometimes some of the spices, you look at the price, really high price. Other spices you look at, not as high price, right? So, you know, you can always kind of decide. I do have to say though, you do want to stay away, you know, like from the gel spices like the cinnamon and stuff. I do that with the coffee. It does not end up being good. I can't even strain it, you know, in the coffee, you know, with the gel spices and stuff. I was trying to do the cinnamon sugar. It really didn't work out well at all. So just, you know, letting you know. I am a little bit tired. I definitely am a little bit tired today. So, all right. So we're gonna get the knives. I did buy new knives, so I'm gonna use 3 knives, and I'm gonna get a plate. I need to get a plate too. I'm gonna use actually all 3. Most of the time on something like this, I like to use a smaller knife. Okay, pretty small knife there. However, some of this stuff I'm not really gonna be able to get through it with a smaller knife because it is such a larger amount here. So I'm gonna have to use a larger knife, and then I'm just going to use those 2 right off. I have a 3rd knife I can use, but I'm going to use those. And then I have to think, first off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to cut the fat into a container. And I will use I'll get these 2 containers. I don't know how much fat there's going to be. I can't tell right now if I'll be, you know, have too much or too little for either one of these. I mean, it looks like I should have enough for some of them, but I'm not really sure right now. And that's pretty much where I'm going to start. I'm going to get this light on here, and then I'll put the camera on here so you can see it. And then we're pretty much just going to try to get into this. What I want to do is I'm going to use also the roasting pan, because with the sink here, anything that goes over is going to be gone. If something were to accidentally go over and be gone and it splashes, that, you know, soapy water could come back up and get this. I don't want that at all. So I want to keep this in a container or something large enough just to hold it. And so that's pretty much going to be the roasting pan. Which means I'll have to, you know, get this cleaned out and wash this as well. I also want to see there doesn't seem to be a terrible amount of liquid in this as well. So this is going to be cut open and go into this. And for time purposes, I am going to put a little bit of seasoning right in the bottom of this, because as soon as this comes out of here, I want to get this seasoning right on this meat, all through it. So I'm just going to do a little bit here. This isn't for cooking. This is just to get it on contact, basically. Okay, I'm a little bit nervous about this. Will this fit? It'll fit partially. Okay. I'm actually not gonna use the garbage. I'm gonna get an extra towel. 2 towels, 3 towels. I'm gonna have to wipe my hands a few times, because that's gonna happen. I'm gonna get stuff on my hands, and a little bit of paper towels. Just a couple extras over here. And I'm gonna set them over here just to use them. I'll put them over here so I have easier time getting them. Okay, and this is going to be cut open basically. I'm going to still use the same knife. I just have to deal with that. I don't really have the ability to use a separate knife for cutting the bag. It's something I would sometimes do. And I'm also not going to immediately season it in the bag. But I can feel a little bit of tincture in my hands in terms of dealing with this. And some of this meat will tear a little bit as I try to cut it. Okay, now this has got to go right in this. And it's going to be off. And that's sort of a problem for me. But I've got it there. Okay. Now this has got to slide over here a little bit. And I basically just want to try to get this seasoned as best as I can. Not for totally, but just getting this on here. Getting it sort of in this area of the bone, the fat, all over here. I can look at some of the meat too. It looks pretty good. And then what I got to do is pretty much just start cutting it. Okay. So I'm going to have to use both hands and get this over here. What I will do is wipe that on a paper towel. Just sort of, not clean, but just sort of wipe this. You know, I did have some of the plastic in there, and I'll use this. Now this is going to come back over to here. I don't want to cut it in. Cutting through on this is a little bit difficult. I don't want to waste too much time. But what I'm going to try to do is I got to get this back on the cutting board. And then what we got to do here is I'm going to season. Some of the seasoning didn't get on there, so I'm going to season it a little bit more. Just get as much on there as I can. And then we're going to pretty much start with getting some of this fat off of here. And I need to get the container open over here. And just really just start cutting this and putting it in the container. I won't have that added amount of time to get everything sort of off of there. And I don't want to go too fast because then I end up cutting a lot of that meat on here. Some of this just sort of tears a little bit. I got a little bit extra of the meat on there that I don't want. I want to be able to cook that meat. It's basically going to go right in here. And I'm going to add a little bit of seasoning to that. I'll add seasoning to this. And we'll just sort of move through this a bit. Try to get as much of only fat as you can off of this. Go a little bit too fast, you think, oh, you know, I have a little bit of trouble there. I want to keep getting that seasoning on there, on that, you know, new parts of that meat. Almost get some of that off of there. This is meat there. A little bit extra meat there. I'm going to try to cut off that. It's almost like I'm starting to go too slow through this. This is actually going to be good meat to cook there. Don't want that to slide off the table there. Over on this side, you think, okay, I'm going to get a lot more of this fat over here. This. It's like a little piece of pepper there. No, that's a little bit of. That was definitely thicker here. Okay. Larger amount of fat there. Getting into some of the bone here for that rib bone, but there's fat around it. It's a careful one. I need to add more spice to this as I get more of this meat out here. Let me get this in as much as I can. Oh, did I lose it? No. Oh man. My eyes just instinctively shut there as I kind of cut through that piece. I thought, what happened? Some of this is starting to fall on the ground. I'm not too happy about that. This is going to be a meat piece that's going to come off. And then under it is fat. I need to get some seasoning on this plate right here as I go through this. My back is really starting to tighten. I need a sip of soda. I want some of this meat that has this fat in it. It can be really flavorful. So you have to kind of be careful about cutting into that. And just the little pieces of meat will cook in something very flavorful. Getting down to some of the rib here. So I will have to kind of change how I cut this as I get closer and closer to the rib, but there's so much fat, it's almost like you end up saying, I'm going to spend so much additional time getting more of the fat. I need to maybe start cutting into some of the rib portion. This has meat on it. Into the rib on that, so we're gonna have to change how I'm cutting this, but I don't necessarily want to because I'm still getting quite a bit of this fat off of here. Which is good. Going to begin to cut meat portions off of this with a little bit of fat on them. Have sort of a type of thing over here. Is that fat or it's fat? So what I'm going to begin doing now is pretty much seasoning and cutting for meat portions. What I'm going to do is get this with a little bit more seasoning into the freezer and almost pretty much just begin to wrap. I've got a little bit of too much of this this seasoning in one spot on this. But the lid will go on this. It almost doesn't fit totally, but okay. Oh, my bad. Just gonna put that there the best I can. I can actually fit it into there better when I have a little bit more time. And what I can do is start putting this into the roasting pan. Oh, I lost it. I lost a piece. That makes me really mad. You know, even if you keep the stove clean, you don't want to collect the meat on the stove. You can, but if you clean it, it's got, you know, stuff on it. If you don't clean it, it doesn't. And it ends up having all this other food and stuff on it. So it's a little bit of it. That's my first lost piece. I am still going to be cutting off the fat here. But I wanted to cut off a piece of some of the meat here as it sort of separates into kind of these different type of cuts. Not specific cuts, just the way I'm cutting it. What I can do is already start putting some of this into the freezer. Okay. I will try to do this the best that I can, as fast as I can. Leave this over here. There's some soda. Okay. You can see some of these pieces look pretty good. So I'll just make sure to season a little bit. Most of them have a little bit of seasoning already, but part of them does not. And then just sort of lay these on here. This is sort of a mixture of stuff that will cook, I think, pretty well. Some of this will have more fat than others, and I will just sort of, I try to do is get these pieces so they're pretty good. Two bags here. One goes over here. And pretty much as soon as it goes on the plate, whatever different style it is, if it's just little pieces, I'll try to get those little pieces, and then hopefully I won't really be able to remember when I cook them, but I will pretty much be able to, you know, I guess maybe cook different pieces at, you know, different times. Oh. Definitely feel the tincture in my arm and my hand. And this starts going in the freezer. I'm gonna have to try to keep open space in here. I just don't know exactly how I'm gonna get all of this. I have some stuff from my mom I can take out and put in the refrigerator. Definitely getting warmer now. Need to get all the seasoning on it right now. Fat will go here. Get for mostly fat. It's gotta be seasoned. Got a little bit of a fat part in here that I want to basically just cut this part out. That is actually ready. A little bit of seasoning. And that's got to go in. That. Okay. Got another bag here. Seasoning down to that kind of that lower layer there. I do have a bone that's been cut partially there. Oh, that's not the way that I wanted that. Be a little bit longer. Leave that actually the length that it is. I have to, it might get folded a little bit in this aluminum foil. And that's actually ready to go in as well. I'm just going to leave that as it is. Just kind of fold that top part there. Add these two other pieces. Bag here. Add some seasoning. Get some of ribs here. Some of these pieces have to be a little bit smaller because I'm going to get a larger fat content off of this. meat here. Seasoned. This is going to go in. Some of this fat I may have to remove, like that's already been in the freezer, because I have to get all this other meat in here. I just dropped it. Basically going to put this in other bags that I have in there as well. Other pieces of meat, whether it's beef or pork already, because I have to just get everything that I can to fit in the freezer. Also need more seasoning. That's enough for one right there. do the best I can with some of this. There's quite a bit of fat here. And I'm gonna need more seasoning. Okay. Yeah. Let's replace the spoon. Finish the salt. So that salt is finished. I almost finished the garlic, and I gotta open an onion. Got a little bit of paper in there too. This paper also has aluminum on it, so it's a little bit difficult to try to deal with. I'm going to end up using a spoon on it to get this piece out. And add the onion. Not really what I want. Okay, more seasoning on everything basically. also put more seasoning on some of this fat. What I will do is get out the other container of fat and sort of move it closer with a utensil so that I'm able to have more of the fat basically in this container. But a lot of this is pretty solid fat. I want to try to get it into all sort of the spots in here, but I don't know if it's actually not the best use of time, as some of this meat and everything sort of warms up. I think, okay, I got to get it all sort of in there. A lot of it will fit, so I end up not needing a additional space and container. So now I need more aluminum. tired and slowing down. I'm wondering. I may not feel well in a minute, but I will just sort of continue on. More seasoning. Salted piece here. Ah! I jabbed. I got too tired. I do not have blood, but I jabbed. I'm gonna have a little bit of difficulty with some of this. I have a couple of pieces of fish and some other fit that in there. Come on. Okay, this has got to go down here for just a little while. sides here. There's 2 of them. Smaller mounts here. Seems like that works better. I get another container. These over here. A little bit more spaces. Last one can fit in here. There's some soda. Okay. This fat probably needs to go in the freezer right now. So we'll try to get this sort of moved over to the side so I can add more to it in a little while. Add more seasoning. It's a larger piece right there. I might have to start cutting the ribs and just make them very sort of, you know, heavy with meat. I'm not really sure because I'm getting very tired. This. The second one. I'm getting a little irritation in my nose, so I started saying, oh, you know, this container. I'm starting to get to some of the ribs here. And so when I start to get some of the ribs, it's pretty much I'm wondering how I'm going to start cutting around this. What type of, how much meat I want to have on the ribs when I cook them. You can pretty much just kind of keep going down a ways here, but some of this here just basically all comes off. What this is going to do is kind of go in here. Pretty much cut don't know if it'll fit in that. It won't fit in that. Oh, almost missed that one. Hands have gotten definitely a lot of seasoning on them. see, I'm going to add this seasoning to here. And I'm not sure what I'm going to... I'll cut this into a couple pieces. And get this sort of all this seasoning here. It's got some fat and some meat mixed in. And so just get this out of this pan right here and goes right into this container. It's not in aluminum or a bag, but it's going to have this bone piece in it. And as you can see there, it's been cut kind of right on the edge. So I'm just kind of gonna see what's going to happen with that. I am going to scrape this for all the little bits and stuff that's all just basically going to go into this container. I can kind of cook it a different way each time, you know, just trying to see how to cook it. Whether I do it in a pan or the oven, I'm not really sure yet, because it does kind of have that different. This actually has a fair amount of fat on it, but it also has meat on it. So it's something that I might definitely want to kind of cook for a while, you know, cook for a longer amount of time to let kind of some of the fat cook and some of the meat cook, as opposed to just only cooking the meat, only cooking the fat. I pretty much got everything here that I the best I could, pretty much. You know, I try not to spill very much. I'm pretty tired too. So this is going to go right in the freezer, and that is 18 pounds right there. So, and I am definitely tired. Just over 18 pounds. I have this piece that fell. A couple little things here that fell down. I gotta clean this up, do the dishes. I'm probably gonna have to clean the aluminum foil container, obviously. But I seem to use the right amount of spices. Some pieces will have a little bit more spice than others. I got little pieces here, which is good. I did not have, you know, sort of a larger piece go. I was worried. Sometimes, like I was talking about earlier, you'll get a larger piece to go, and it just sort of changes everything. You're like, wait a minute. So, oh man. Let's set this over here. Maybe have a little sip of soda. Sort of rest a little, and then I got to come back and clean this up. I have dishes in the dishwasher. I will wash my hands. I'm not actually going to wash the cutting board right now. I have to let that sit. I'm just too tired to get this all soapy water and everything and just going right into cleaning the whole thing, because I got to clean the roasting pan. I got to get all the dishes out. I'm just definitely tired after that. I don't know how long that took. Let's see. Where are we in time? So we're at almost 2 hours. Okay, so definitely a little bit longer than not necessarily longer than I anticipated. It's just, you know, I did do a little bit of an introduction and stuff. So, you know, as they cut each piece was going in. So I'm going to end there. It's almost going on 8:30 Pacific Standard Time. I hope you're doing well, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.